humblemud.
I'll be honest with you. Whenever I'm watching hidden gems videos for various consoles and they hit that puzzle section, I usually skip it. That's not to say I hate using my brain though. I love games with heavy puzzle elements like Zelda, Crosscode, or Silent Hill, but for some reason that standalone pure puzzle genre has always been something I've had zero desire to play. However, in my Gaming Grids video that I did earlier this year, which was a super fun video to make and I'm glad you guys enjoyed that one, I talked about how surprised I was that I became such a fan of Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker. And I think that's because while Captain Toad is absolutely a puzzle game at its core, it's also a charming little adventure with a cute character navigating a fun world. It has personality, it's inviting, and has just enough of a story to make me care. That got me wondering, was Captain Toad the gateway that I needed? Maybe I didn't actually dislike puzzle games. Maybe I just struggled to get invested in puzzle games because they often strip away all of the elements that I normally connect with. So over the past few months, I decided to test that theory. I slowly worked my way from character-driven puzzle adventures into more distilled, purely mechanical puzzle experiences, and the results were honestly pretty surprising. So if you're someone who has always struggled to get into the puzzle genre, maybe seeing my journey can help you carve your own path. But anyway, why Captain Toad? Well, the charm of that game is just absolutely immaculate. Toad's heavy backpack prevents him from jumping, so unlike regular Mario games, you really have to be clever about how you're going to get from one place to another. At the same time, you're still in that familiar Mario setting with classic power-ups and enemies, but the game also throws in plenty of curveballs like unique boss fights and game mechanics like rotating and manipulating the stage. It's delightful, very pick up and play, and it's so cool to see this concept fully realized considering it was originally just a mini-game in Super Mario 3D World. And from there, I noticed I had a couple more puzzle-heavy games available on the Wii U, so I decided to stick with that platform for the time being. This led me to Teslagrad. You play as this little unnamed boy in an unfamiliar and honestly kind of scary world. It opens with a wordless, dark, gritty intro reminiscent of something like Inside, where you're just running to who knows where, people are trying to capture you, and you fall into this surprisingly high-tech underground facility given the time period. The best way that I can describe the game is that it's a puzzlevania. It's essentially a Metroidvania with almost zero direct combat. You have no real way to fight enemies most of the time. I mean, oftentimes there aren't even enemies in the rooms. Instead, it's all about using magnetic abilities to solve puzzles. You'll be flipping polarities so that you can bring objects together, make them fly across the room, or even magnetize yourself so that you can temporarily fly through certain areas. And there is some combat, namely in the boss fights, which can actually get pretty tough and sometimes frustrating because you can only take one hit. But 90% of the game is just exploration and puzzle solving in these lost and forgotten environments, and I really enjoyed it overall, especially thanks to that wonderful art style and sense of atmosphere. Even coming back now to get footage of the early game again, I was just blown away at how mysterious and intriguing this game's world can be. However, after that darker experience, I swung back towards something more colorful again, Pushmo World. You play as this tiny little marshmallow guy, pushing blocks in and out to reach the top of these structures so that you can then rescue all the little Pushmo babies that are hidden inside of the walls. You can only push or pull these walls up to 3 layers deep or 3 layers out, so you have to get really creative in order to make your way to the top. While it's ridiculously charming and addictive, it also absolutely stumped me more than a few times. Sometimes I would just stand there staring or doing a lot of trial and error until it eventually clicked. The game has a ton of levels, but even if you beat those, there's a really cool feature I wanted to talk about here. Even though the Wii U and 3DS online servers are officially long gone, the way that custom levels were transferred back in the Wii U and 3DS era for this game was via QR codes. So what that means is that even today, offline, you can still experience these custom levels. And I just wanted to shout that out because I feel like it's really cool how Pushmo accidentally future-proofed itself like that. Now, I've pushed through about 30 or so levels, still haven't fully beaten it, but I adore this little guy in his game. Nintendo, please bring Pushmo back. Alright, and then all of a sudden, life threw me a curveball. As you might know, I fractured my elbow earlier this year, and so I had to keep my left arm in a sling, and for about 2 months I could only play one-handed. And I realized in the midst of this that the Wii is probably the ultimate one-handed friendly game console because it has such a great selection of games where you only need the Wii remote and its pointer controls. So the natural next step in my puzzle journey was the WiiWare classic, which was originally a Game Boy Color game, by the way, Toki Tori. Now, I've seen the HD version of this game on the Switch eShop for like almost a decade now, but I figured the Wii version would be the most ideal one for me to play considering my injuries. And I'm really glad I did, because even though it is 480p here on an actual Wii, the Wii version has a unique feature not present in any other version, a feature that really made me start thinking differently about puzzle games. But first, what's the game like in general? Well, similar to Captain Toad or Pushmo, you control an incredibly cute protagonist that you just can't help but root for. And the goal here is to collect all the eggs, essentially rescuing your younger siblings, all while avoiding monsters, pitfalls, and dangerous areas. You also have a limited number of abilities that you can use across each stage, so you can accidentally get stuck and have to restart, or get nearly to the end and realize you don't have what you need. It happens more often than you would think. This forces you to stop, think, plan, and make lots of little micro decisions along the way, but the charm really keeps it from getting frustrating. And like Captain Toad, Toki Tori can't jump, so just getting from point A to point B is a puzzle in and of itself. Now, the thing that I referenced earlier, the biggest surprise for me was finding out that the Wii version has this adorable little extra feature. When I finished my first play session with this game, I noticed that I got some messages in my Wii message board. I opened it up, and it turns out that Toki Tori writes little postcards to his family back home documenting his journey. He writes about the highs and lows and how nervous he is, but also how proud he is of himself, and it's just so cute. But a more profound thing that I internalized during this moment was that his little postcards allowed me to separate myself from him. Whereas I could easily project myself onto silent protagonists like the boy from Teslagrad, seeing more explicitly through these letters that Toki Tori is his own little being with his own thoughts and feelings created this layer of separation for me where I no longer felt like I was him, and instead I felt like I was just helping him along. Toki Tori was just one layer closer to a pure puzzle game for me in comparison to the other games that I had played before, and that realization made me feel like maybe I was ready for something else. So while I was still in that fractured elbow recovery mode, I stumbled upon another one-handed puzzle gem, Kororinpa Marble Mania. Now this was it. This game was the major turning point for me. Kororinpa was the first game where I completely moved away from a character. Instead of controlling a sentient being, you're just guiding a simple marble through physics-based puzzles. You hold the Wii remote pointed at the sensor bar and tilt or rotate it to tilt the entire platform, kind of like Super Monkey Ball, but this game definitely has a unique vibe all its own that makes it feel different. And as you navigate these topsy-turvy, wild environments, you're also trying to collect all the gems that you can, because that allows you to open the door to the next level. More than anything else, Kororinpa has such a peaceful aesthetic and soothing soundtrack that makes it such a joy to play, and it became one of the most addictive games in this video, oddly enough. In fact, it turned into my perfect morning coffee game. Wake up, grab a cup, and just ease into my morning with this relaxing yet engaging little adventure. It proved to me that I could still get hooked on a puzzle adventure even without a cute character to care about. And I think Kororinpa really served as the ideal bridge for me between the more narrative-heavy platformer puzzle games like Captain Toad or Teslagrad and the pure mechanical puzzle experiences that I was trying to make my way toward. And now with this under my belt, I felt like it was time to revisit those dreaded, storyless puzzle games. Now, in my original Grids video, I mentioned that I wasn't really a fan of Lumines, and someone in the comments called that a red flag. Touché, totally fair. Anyway, that little comment stuck with me. In fact, it was honestly one of the motivations behind this whole experiment, so I decided to start this pure puzzle journey by giving this franchise in particular another shot. And that's when I discovered that there's an HD entry in the franchise called Lumines Electronic Symphony, available on the PlayStation Vita, which ended up being exactly what I needed. Now, it might sound shallow, but there's just something about experiencing those bright, vibrant colors and that hypno-rhythmic gameplay in HD that completely sets it apart from the PSP original that I played and dismissed previously. I'm not here to say that one is definitively better than the other, but for me personally, the HD presentation was a game changer. And more than any other game on this entire list, by far, Lumines Electronic Symphony was the most addictive. Entire 20 to 30-minute sessions would just melt away, and even worse, I wanted another one right after. I fell hard for the soundtrack, and it became the ultimate just one more game kind of title. I've sunk a lot of time into it now, and while my skill doesn't really indicate that because I'm still learning, plus to be fair, in order to capture footage, I filmed this whole thing with my PlayStation TV, and it's just a little awkward for me compared to playing it on the handheld that I'm used to. This satisfaction of finally breaking through barriers and getting to a new phase is so rewarding. This game genuinely broke the dam and let the floodwaters of puzzle enjoyment rush in. It also gave me a fantastic excuse to dust off and replay my Vita regularly, which I'm trying to do even more now just to spite Sony. This game rules. Since Lumines is so Tetris adjacent, that naturally led me to finally give the original Tetris another shot. And now that I know that the visuals were such a big deal for me with Lumines apparently, I started to wonder if plain old Game Boy Tetris was really for me. But then again, I know that the original Game Boy version is still a lot of people's favorite to this day, so I didn't want to completely dismiss it. In order to spice things up a bit then, I decided to play the Rosy Retrospection mod of the original Tetris. This mod basically turns the game into a Tetris DX style experience. It basically gives the game a big splash of Game Boy Color vibrancy, just like the DX versions of Super Mario Bros. Or Link's Awakening from back in the day. While I admittedly don't enjoy it quite as much as Lumines, I am officially playing and enjoying Tetris for the first time in my life, and I think that's a pretty huge milestone when you consider where I was even a few months ago. And even though I'm horrible at the game, I can see why it has hooked so many people for decades. The music goes a long way, that's for sure. And after that, I started to get a little more experimental. I remembered seeing Puzzle Bobble, also known as Bust-A-Move, discussed in a lot of old Neo Geo forums back in the day. It was apparently so addictive for some that it kind of disrupted their lives. I guess I was ready to play with danger, and I've always loved the cute Bubble Bobble dinosaurs, so I figured that now was a better time than any to try it. And even though you still see the little characters on screen, I wouldn't really say that this is a character-driven game in the same way that like Captain Toad is. I still think it counts as a pure puzzler. It's super simple, you're essentially trying to connect bubbles of the same color, but the twist is that the game is blended with a breakout style aiming and shooting, and there's this pressure from the clock that constantly keeps the game's pacing up as the screen gets closer and closer to your characters, threatening to crush them. That extra layer of gameplay variety really works for me, as I honestly do enjoy Breakout ever since I first played that on my iPod Nano in like the early 2000s, though I will say, like some of the other games on this list, I'm pretty bad at the game and I get kind of stressed when the time runs low. Admittedly, I do wish it gave you just a little more breathing room sometimes, but I'm genuinely enjoying Puzzle Bobble, and it's one that I've been coming back to. And lastly, this whole journey led me to something I never thought I would play. 2048. I remember seeing tons of non-gamers absolutely obsessed with this game, and I honestly think that rampant popularity of it just kind of pushed me away from ever even considering it. 2048 just looks so simple, so pointless, honestly so sauceless to me at the time. And now, over a decade late to the party, I think I get it. 2048 is basically a satisfying numbers matching game where you slide tiles to combine like numbers with the goal of building them higher and higher until the board eventually fills up and you run out of moves. Now, I often catch myself kind of going on autopilot sometimes, just moving them around, but I really have begun to enjoy playing it. In fact, lately, I've been playing a particularly nice pocket version of 2048 on this little device that I'll be covering in an upcoming video, so more on that soon. Looking back on this whole journey, I guess I learned that I didn't really dislike puzzle games. I think I just disliked being dropped straight into cold, abstract mechanics with no real emotional hook or attachment. However, once I experienced them through charming characters, atmosphere, story, and peaceful progression, slowly inching my way toward purer forms of the genre, the mechanics started to feel more like distilled fun rather than cold indifference. With all of that said, I'm still quite green to the world of puzzle games myself, so I'd love to know your recommendations as to what I should consider experiencing next. Maybe some classics like Puyo Puyo, Dr. Mario, or Super Puzzle Fighter, or if you guys have any suggestions that often go overlooked or otherwise really humblemud coded, I'm all ears. I know this was a really different video for me, but it was also a really fun journey, and I hope that you guys enjoyed being a part of it. If you're still here, thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay humble.